The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast are based on information available at the time of the recording and are subject to change in the future. The content provided is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice or a substitute for consulting with qualified professionals. Listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to Lexception. In this episode, we'll be talking about flexing. Gone are the days when our society even value a semblance of good manners and right conduct. Take humility, for example. Does anyone live a low-key existence these days? Or are we all just a bunch of social media show-offs, or ready to broadcast to just about anyone every so-called win we experience in real life? Is flexing just an accepted behavior today? This is Weird Flex. Let's start with the definition of flexing. Flexing refers to the act of showing off one's wealth, possessions, achievements, or lifestyle in a very overt and sometimes exaggerated manner. It's about displaying one's status or success to impress others or gain social recognition. This can include posting photos or videos of expensive items like cars, jewelry, designer clothes, luxurious vacations, exclusive events, or any other symbols of high social status or wealth. The term flexing carries a connotation of trying to make a strong impression on one's audience, often with the intent of invoking envy or admiration. What's also striking in this age of social media is how flexing seems to be encouraged behavior. You'd often encounter quite a lot of Filipino vloggers who focus on what I'd refer to as aspirational content. They feature their travels, new homes, cars, and other splurges. Most would claim that these types of content are meant to inspire others and not to brag. Many followers and subscribers who gobble up such content do seem to find these posts aspirational or inspirational. But if you're really discerning and perceptive, you'd easily recognize these displays of whatever as essentially flexing. Now, because a large number of online plebeians don't seem to mind or care, flexing has become accepted practice. It isn't tacky or uncouth. It's not a manifestation of lack of class. It's encouraged behavior. Dive into the cesspool, that is the comment section of any of these aspirational content vloggers, and you'd encounter the popular retort to anyone who dare point out the gaudiness of the content with something like, kapag inggit, pikit. Never mind if a lot of these vloggers and influencers have already resorted to phoniness and schemes. Since they get a lot of engagement from these aspirational content junkies, they do resort to faking or staging their content. So whatever you see are just carefully engineered bits designed to elicit a reaction. Now let's move on to something that is called weird flex. To attempt to define it, it's when you can't quite put your finger on whether or not the flex is intentional as the audience. Often you'd wonder if the person flexing is just oblivious about how the gesture can be perceived, or it's really a conscious attempt to flaunt what they have. Context does matter and it can be pretty easy to spot a weird flex. One time during the pandemic, the kid was doing online classes. The teacher asked the class to submit family photos since they were discussing the concept of family. Customarily, a casual group shot at a nondescript location would do. A family portrait should already be the fanciest for such a requirement, and that's what most of the kids in the class did. As for the weird flex, there's this one kid, and by kid probably I mean his parents, who sent a collage of his family raising glasses while in a first class of some fancy airline and a bunch of other pictures in a bunch of European landmarks. I mean, what other reason would you choose such images for your classmates and their parents to see other than to flex, right? One other instance is when the kid was already in big school and they were asked to wear Filipiniana for the usual August festivities. Suddenly, in the parents' group chat, one mom started posting pictures of her kid wearing designer ternos, and a bunch of other moms started doing the same. All the while, all the other kids were just wearing makeshift costumes or were using ones that cost just about a few hundred pesos. There's no actual point in mentioning that what the kid was wearing was designed by some fancy designer other than to flex. So those are just a couple of examples of what weird flexing is. Another reason why I consider such flexing as weird is because it takes a very specific audience to recognize the outlandishness of the display. It does require a person prior knowledge of how spiffy flying first class is, or to recognize the landmarks, or to know a particular fashion designer. But what's more disconcerting is that it's the middle class, the ones you'd expect to display just a tad more tacted class, that's often guilty of these weird flexing. There's this relatively popular Facebook group called Home Buddies, which started out as a way for middle class folks to share some home hacks. Not soon after, many observed that the post became dominated by people flexing their privilege. For example, the so-called hacks some were posting were often just staged to feature some expensive accessory, furniture, or appliance, rather than actually trying to help people find ways to save money or be smart about improving their homes. On a side note, this group encouraged the creation of a satirical counter group called Home Pastupa Buddies, which poked fun at the other group and even featured some self-deprecating humor that focused on Filipinos' poverty-inspired ingenuity. Now, weird flexes can sometimes fall flat, especially for those conscious enough that flexing doesn't really do anyone any good. There's always someone richer, more famous, and better than you. And for people who are familiar with real wealth and luxury, they know that these don't need any flexing at all. Personally, I've been around some of the one percenters of Philippine society, and it's usually these people that never flex. I mean, there are signs of their affluence, but they never had to flex online or otherwise. I guess the ones that are featured on Tatler and the society pages of broadsheets are a minority. It's even surprising how humble and classy many of them are. So, if flexing were such a widely displayed and accepted behavior these days, whatever happened to humility? Historically, humility has been considered a cornerstone of good manners and etiquette. You weren't supposed to flaunt your wealth, achievements, or possessions. In the good old days, it was seen as tacky, arrogant, and in poor taste. This ethos was rooted in the belief that one's worth should be measured by character and actions rather than material possessions or social status. Mind you, humility was not just a personal virtue, but a social expectation. Let's talk about why humility matters. Well, humility fosters a sense of equality and community. By not flaunting what you have, you avoid making others feel less fortunate or envious. This ideally creates a more harmonious social environment where people can be judged by their actions and behaviors rather than through their possessions. But as we all know, times change, and with them, so do social norms. I guess we're a lot more materialistic now. In Philippine culture these days, it's all about social standing, and what better way to assert one's social status than to flex? Now, as I see it, whether something is really a flex or not should be determined by the flexer's intent. But I guess how you react to it really depends on you, whether you choose to be bothered by it or not. Flexing is quite a selfish act, so don't expect flexers to display any real, genuine humility. Still, this should give fair warning to anyone attempting to flex. If you do it among those who are discerning enough, you'd easily be outed as a phony, and rather than elicit admiration, you can very well be associated with the lack of truth and class. So that's it for this episode. I'll catch you on the next one.